get you talk a little bit about that drug and alcohol abuse
Sure.
and the homeless. You know, we talk about the Walnut Creek, which actually isn't in Walnut Creek, the Walnut Creek that goes through Concord. There were huge populations of tents right down the middle of that. And when winter came, they moved them out.
Yeah.
We didn't have the winter that we had hoped for. So, but Jaime, why don't you weigh in on that?
Sure. And I was actually, while you were talking, I'm going to look up and see in our annual report, I think we do have some data about self-report disabilities, including mental health and substance abuse. But one thing that I often say is that sort of one of the defining or sort of hallmark things of homelessness is trauma, right? So many people become homeless because of early childhood trauma. That leads to mental health challenges and leads to, you know, substance abuse, but also becoming homeless is very traumatic, and particularly for women, just the rates of assaults within the first 2 weeks is astronomical. And so I don't know that you could clearly identify which is which, but I think they are very linked. I think the trauma of homelessness is very linked to the mental health and substance abuse issues. Sorry, my cat just unplugged the computer. So that's my sort of nutshell. Sorry, my cat is messing with my computer.
That's okay. That's certainly
working from home.
That's certainly helpful. Let's jump back to Iman just for a moment. And that complaint constantly, you know, I often laugh at my 90-year-old mother at the time complaining that she couldn't afford to shop in Walnut Creek, and she was here since 1945. But the idea of these beautiful structures are going up all over, and they seem to be, gosh, DMV lot and they're across from Target, all of these wonderful places, and the people are scratching their heads and saying, well, wait a minute, we are building like crazy in Walnut Creek. What is it? And then you look at the cost of a 2-bedroom apartment downtown and you go, whoa, I can see. So Iman, give us a thought on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's pretty consistent across most cities where the market rate developers are doing a good job of building all of the housing for those who earn 120% of the median income or higher, sort of that highest level of regional housing needs. And we're not doing a good enough job building housing, whether it's communities like Trinity Center, which are standalone, government subsidized sort of public housing or tax credit housing, or requiring market rate developers to set aside within their market rate projects enough units to sort of balance the need at the level. And so it's two different worlds from a development perspective. You have affordable housing developers that are very much versed in the legal complexities of tax credits and layers of financing. And the way they think about development is very different than market rate developers that are focused on IRR and returns and, you know, two sources of just debt and equity, not, you know, debt, equity, and 30 different government program layers to build housing. So it's just very different models. And, you know, one of the roles that I have as the new affordable housing development chair for the county continuum of care, the Council on Homelessness, is to sort of, you know, talk about these different, there's different approaches to creating affordable housing. Some are more market driven. And I have seen an influx of market rate capital, you know, larger investment banks, you know, that historically have only been focused on market rate housing, coming into the affordable housing arena for the first time in a long time. And they're looking at things like, you know, using robotic arms to build modules to keep the construction costs low, shipping these modules to sites. They're looking at tiny homes. You know, there's a group called Panoramic Interest that's building these little tiny modules that can stack together to build housing for the homeless much more cost effectively. Partnerships with churches and faith-based communities where they have excess land or discounted land available for mission-driven developers to come in and build housing. So it's, I think part of it is just a mismatch, and people don't understand that as an affordable housing developer, you can still earn a profit by still doing good. You can still you earn a developer fee. I think we need to encourage more people to get into the affordable housing development arena. There's high barriers to entry, and really try to get the market rate sector focused on market-driven approaches to creating housing. Because if we're only going to rely on affordable housing developers, we're never going to build fast enough and enough housing. So,
well, let's talk about the big, the big stone in the room, folks. It is within the region, within Walnut Creek, within the state, not in my neighborhood. We hear that, not in my neighborhood. So when you say that developing, it costs the same to build market rate or affordable, it costs the same for a developer to do that unless there is some economic incentive. And then we have a neighboring city that shall remain nameless, where there's been a development that has tried to, I will say, go in across the street from my daughter's high school for years. And the fight is on. The fight is on. And as long as we have those kinds of fights, people are happy to have. I mean, let's ask a question. Why don't we have Trinity centers in every city in Contra Costa County? Why not? Why the Concord shelter closed down? There's nothing in East County. And when Jaime was showing resources, we saw Richmond and Walnut Creek. And how long have we had this issue?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. There's a confluence of misinformation and I would say proactivity on the part of resources to kind of get better information out sometimes. And then a lot of interference to that information, and people get worried. Now, the worry isn't completely without base. Yes, you do sometimes have an increase of problems that come with these, with some of these housing areas. But on balance, is that the driving problem? I think it's more of the fear of that than it is the actual reality of that. And so, yeah, I mean, I get it. It's reasonable for people to feel nervous and scared and whatnot about something they're unfamiliar with. But certainly, the police department, the county, other, affordable housing development can partner up to maybe be better about communicating, hey, why this is actually better for our community, why this is actually going to create a better quality of life for everybody. Crime is going to happen. Quality of life issues are always going to happen. But it's a healthier society. It's a healthier community that has less of that, not more of that. So yeah, there's a way, and probably historically it's been done wrong in the past, and people think of that and they point to that, and they don't necessarily point at the times it's been done right. And again, so I think it's really a communication thing and information interference would be I'm not sure who you're throwing that question out to, Matt, but that would be my assessment, because I've seen it in Walnut Creek. I've seen, I will speak highly of the Commons specifically, talking about earlier Jamie's slide, and talking about earlier criminals that maybe are by definition homeless, but they're criminals first, not homeless people committing crimes, came to our Commons area and caused a problem. And one of the residents that was associated, you don't get this a lot, one of the residents that was associated and friends with these said, no. And they came to the police and said, I know who did X, Y, Z. It's these people right here. And came forward. And I will tell you that's a direct result of Gary and his partner's work in the past. Is they felt comfortable approaching Gary and his partner to say, hey, I know who did this and I know why, and they're friends of mine, but I'm not okay with this. I'm being given an opportunity here and whatnot. So information like that, it would be better if people kind of knew that. But of course, in law enforcement, we got to walk a tightrope about like letting stuff like that be known. But anyway, so just so you're aware, I'm a fan of the Trinity Commons and the strict rules and guidelines, that a high bar that they set. The same with the winter shelter, which we haven't talked about yet, I don't think, but they're constantly reaching out to me and saying, hey, any concerns with us allowing this person into the winter shelter, or any warrants outstanding? They don't just, I think that's the perception. I think the perception is that this type of service is just open to anybody. You can be irresponsible and whatnot and just grab these services. And that's not the case.
Well, let's ask about, Leslie.
I'll just thank you so much.
You bet.
I would add, as a provider, we would love to be everywhere. We would love to have our model be everywhere. And with all of the successes, we know that, there are going to be naysayers, but that's part of what we sign on to when we do this kind of work, is to constantly take advantage of opportunities to educate and help people see things from different perspectives. But the other big rate limiting thing, frankly, is money. It's costly. We're very people oriented. We're very labor intensive. And then, so with the limited amount of money there is to address homelessness, do we build housing, create permanent supportive housing, make more Trinity centers? It's always that dilemma at the end of the day. So,
can I just jump in real quick, Matt?
Sure.
Well, part of the problem too is that you have to have every single one of these entities going full steam ahead. Otherwise, there's gaps, and we run into these gaps. When we were taking people to the healthcare bus, we were driving them all the way to Richmond because it wasn't in Walnut Creek at the time. If you had all these entities in every city, it would go a lot more smooth. But just we can't work without Corp. We can't work without the Trinity Center. We can't work without the health bus. We need everything. And just to kind of back up real quick, just so everybody knows, I'm always available for ride-alongs. If anybody ever wants to go out, please call either me directly or the PD, and I will take you out. Cindy Darling took advantage of that, and I believe if she was still here, she would tell you it was eye-opening as to the responses I was getting when I was trying to get people the help they needed. So I'll leave that out there for everybody. If you want my cell phone number, I'll give it to you, or you can just call the PD, and I'll be more than happy to take you out for a ride along.
That's good, and thanks very much. I think that's so important. I used to train young deputies when I was in the DA's office, and I said, you can't understand what the police are doing unless you're out driving around and seeing the police interact with citizens on the street. Very important. I recommend everyone, particularly in the city of Walnut Creek, go out and ride with the police department, and it is educational and certainly eye-opening. I do want to say we're coming up. We're pretty close to the end, and I don't want to shut anyone down. I see lots of positives. I see Trinity Center as a positive. Iman talking about growth in building and housing, and even some market rate developers starting to get into. I certainly see, from Jaime's perspective, the plans moving forward, 30%, then 30%, and doing that. But it is a significant problem, and it's a community-wide and regional problem. And we certainly need to continue to address it from that perspective. Jaime, I know I'm seeing lots of chats down here in the chat room. The nice thing is a lot of the questions that had been submitted ahead of time, everyone has answered. We do have the issue of the winter nights, as I call it, and I think was underutilized in the past. I'm not sure that that's still the case. Is that still the case, Leslie, that it was underutilized this last year?
Well, this past year, we had to operate quite differently to keep safety during COVID. But yes, historically, we could serve more people than we do. There are a variety of reasons why we're not full every night. Some of which are the high behavioral expectations, and some of which are transportation. So there are a variety of reasons. And people sometimes will seek out other opportunities. Our population who's experiencing homelessness, they're not monolithic. Sometimes they have options. Sometimes they can hang out with a friend. Sometimes they can't afford a hotel room for a night or two. So a shelter setting where you're publicly exposed and can't really have much agency in your life might not be your first choice every time. But we know for the people who come to us and use us consistently, we're critical for their health and well-being. And I really appreciate Jaime bringing up the issues of the trauma that both leads to and results from homelessness, because that is really significant. And every night that we can prevent that for a man or a woman in Walnut Creek by offering shelter overnight, we're going to do it every night of the week. So.
That's wonderful. Thanks. Jamie, you have some thoughts as we wrap this up?
I am just really happy that this conversation is happening. And Iman, I want to thank you for inviting me. This is, a couple folks have said this, but this is one of the most complicated topics. I always say in my public health career, I've never worked on anything this complicated. There's not one single solution, but I also wanted to really commend Walnut Creek for being leaders on this issue. So I think there's great work happening right now as a, pinch point with COVID, but I think there's some great thinking happening and some great partnerships that are being developed. And I'm always really happy to be a resource. I'm happy to come talk to your groups, explain, what's going on and how our system's set up. Because I think a lot of folks don't fully understand what's happening or why. So always happy to be a resource.
We appreciate that, and we'll certainly call on you as a resource. From the Contra Costa regional perspective, and certainly then the City of Walnut Creek and the Walnut Creek Chamber of Commerce and Visitors Bureau. I am going to give a shout out to our new CEO, Bob Linscheid, who's on the call, and thank you for being our leader in this time. I want to also thank Ron Hermanson. He had to get off because of a family emergency, and Iman, and certainly Pam Kessler, the team and others on our team for putting together this program and asking me to be the moderator. Thank you very much. Thank you, Leslie. Certainly, thank you, Gary Silva and Tony Mangini. Thank you, Iman. And we will keep this in our minds, and we will continue to work on this issue of homelessness, as I say, a much bigger issue than just housing. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating. And we have reached the end of the line on this